There are two contemporary schools of international relations theory. One is called the English school, and closely allied to that, in fact, growing out of that, is the Copenhagen school of international relations theory. These have made their mark in the first instance through the English school because of the insistence that a historical context has got to be taken into consideration when trying to understand why certain states think, behave, and craft their policy in a certain way. To this, the Copenhagen school has added the idea that history continues, it never stops, and with the continuation of history, the constant creation and the recreation of history, you have discursive formations. The discourse of citizens influences the ways that governments act, react, how they form policy. If the discourse becomes one of fear, for instance, and this is widely felt in the citizen body, no responsible government is going to be able to deny or to try to put to one side these fears being expressed in the discourse of the people within the nation. And this gives rise to a situation which the Copenhagen school calls securitization. The state must securitize itself to meet the demands of the discourse which emanates from their citizens. And nowhere is this securitization more apparent than in the state of Israel. The Israeli scholar Uriel Abulov wrote almost a model article describing how this has taken place. The idea of the need for survival, the need of survival in the world at large because of the persecution of the Jewish people, particularly in recent memory, in recent history during World War II, the Shoah, the Holocaust, the concentration camps. All of this created a discourse which has not yet gone away. Not only that, but the idea of finding some rescue in state formation, in the creation of the State of Israel, which would be a particular kind of nation. It was going to be a nation that was a homeland for the Jews. Now, this has been under threat, for better or for worse, from two sides. First of all, there's been the perception of external threat. And of course, this has been met by constant warfare on the part of Israel. Often war has been brought to Israel. But because of superior strategies, because of superior armaments, because of close alignments with superpowers like the United States, the Israelis have always been able to emerge victorious in their wars. However, in more recent times, the threat to the security of the State of Israel has been perceived within Israel itself in terms of internal discourse by, is the Jewish homeland, is the homeland for Jews now threatened? If Palestinians multiply within the borders of the State of Israel beyond a certain extent, will they come to outnumber the Jewish people? Will that mean that Israel is no longer a homeland for the Jews because they are a minority within their own homeland? And if the Palestinians do multiply, if their numbers do grow, and if they are not granted political rights, can it be a homeland for the Jews which is sustained not only by the Jewish people as a minority, but also by the Jewish people enacting a kind of apartheid state in which the majority of people do not have the same political rights as the minority? All, of course, impacting upon the question what to do about the Palestinians. You can't have it both ways, deny them their own state and yet give them no rights within the Jewish state. And this is a conundrum not resolved in Israeli politics, in political discourse, which has only led to fear the longer that this kind of problematic is not fully addressed and not addressed in a sympathetic or even an empathetic fashion. After all, those who once suffered must surely not make others suffer in succession to what has happened in the past. This securitization and the fears of what might happen if the Jewish homeland is no longer apparent, if it can no longer be sustained, has led to the rise of all kinds of cause for greater Jewish population, faster birth rates. It has led to the idea of encouraging greater immigration into the state of Israel. But the more people who come into Israel, in order to accommodate them, in order to sustain the economic base that will make a good society for all of them, the more the drive comes to seize more Palestinian land. The settlements then cause even greater Palestinian resentment, threatens the security of Israel, and a vexatious cycle begins and perpetuates itself over and over again. Abeloff describes this perfectly. It's a very knowing, a very self-knowing article. But the whole idea of securitization is not just confined to the state of Israel. In the Middle East, there is an emerging sense of securitization as a form of competitive discourse among the so-called Arab states, the other Middle Eastern states. The idea of a huge schism between the Sunni states and the Shia states. What should Saudi Arabia, already playing, in Henry Kissinger's fears, some kind of double game with the West, what kind of games should Saudi Arabia, as a Sunni state housing the holy places, Mecca and Medina, what kind of role, what kind of fears should it legitimately have about the expansion of Iran, a Shia state, on the verge of gaining nuclear power itself, until finally the breakthrough in recent talks, which allowed the Iranians to curtail their nuclear program and save political face at the same time. On both sides, the discourse of securitization, of one being threatened by the other, not a state being threatened by another state, but a particular form of confessionalism being threatened by a variation of that same confessionalism. This is being acted out by proxies throughout the Middle East conflicts. It lies at the heart of the insurgency of ISIS. The meltdown in Iraq, the later meltdown in Syria, with their different Sunni and Shia populations, has fueled this particular conflict born of this kind of confessional securitization. And of course, what adds great complexity to the overall picture in the Middle East is Israelis' fear, not only of a securitized environment within its borders, but the external threats have not gone away. Israel almost certainly developed nuclear weapons. Some estimates suggest that it may have several hundred warheads. If Iran had in fact continued its nuclear program, had in fact developed nuclear weapons, suddenly there would have been a balance of power between those two states. Suddenly the regional hegemony, and thus the sense of security Israel was trying to develop, would have been threatened. So now we have the very, very strange spectacle in the Middle East, where an Israel that is not exactly friendly with its Arab neighbors is probably in some kind of, I use the term, unholy alliance with Saudi Arabia, both of them antagonistic towards Iran.